Good afternoon, everyone. If I can call you to order. For those of you who do not know me, I'm John Thornton, the co-chairman of the Board of Trustees of Brookings, and I'm particularly pleased to say a few short remarks about our guest. And if you can indulge me, I'll be a little bit more personal than usual. But when Dick Holbrooke died, there was a memorial service at the Kennedy Center, and Bill Clinton was one of the eulogists. And Bill Clinton got up and he had his glasses over his nose like this, and he got up and he said, "You know what I loved about Dick Holbrooke? He got things done." And I was sitting in the audience, and I remember thinking to myself, boy, is that the truth about Dick Holbrooke? And boy, is that important in life. And I start there because a few years earlier, I was in Indonesia at the Asia Society Williamsburg Conference, and Dick Holbrooke was also there, and Holbrooke had come to Indonesia via Afghanistan in order to collect his good friend, Dr. Abdullah. And he brought Dr. Abdullah to the conference, and we were there for 3 or 4 days together and spent a lot of time. And Holbrooke introduced Dr. Abdullah by saying 2 things. Number 1, this is the man who knows how to get difficult things done. And number 2, this man should be president of the country. He didn't know at that time there was such a role as chief executive. But in any case, coming from Holbrooke as a sign of someone who really knows talent and really knows how to spot somebody who can get difficult things done, I thought that was a particularly appropriate way to welcome you to Brookings. We're very pleased you're here. We, of course, wish you the best in all of your very difficult endeavors. And I'm going to turn this over to Mike O'Hanlon. Where's Mike? Who will introduce Dr. Abdullah more formally and just tell you just one thing about Mike, who is nothing if not prolific, but not only prolific, but deep and prolific. So, for example, with Afghanistan and the work he's done there, he's been to Afghanistan, I think, 12 times in order to do proper research. So there's really nobody better, I think, to introduce Dr. Abdullah than Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, John, and we're just privileged and thrilled, Dr. Abdullah, to have you here. I know we're all looking forward to your remarks, your conversation with Bruce, and then discussion with the audience. So that will be forthcoming in just a moment. But let me just say a couple of words about a man who I think at this moment in history should best be understood as one of the great champions of democracy on the planet. And this is more than just some nice, fuzzy words for some liberal ideal. This matters for American security as much as Afghan security, because Dr. Abdullah, as I think you know from his biography, he was foreign minister in the early days of the post-9/11, post-2001 government. And then he became, in many ways, an opposition leader and a reformer, and developed a campaign in which, even though he ran for president, in some ways he wanted to weaken the office of the presidency, because the initial Constitution that we Americans helped write put so much power into that position that he wanted to have direct elections for governors. He wanted to have more of a parliamentary system. He was already thinking about a reform agenda, creating a reform movement across sectarian and ethnic lines, as you know. He himself is both Tajik and Pashtun, but he prefers not to even think of himself in those terms, but as an Afghan patriot and a reformer. So throughout this entire period, he was developing an agenda, and a very powerful agenda, that, as you know, attracted a great deal of support. He was far and away the first-round leader in last year's polling, for example. And then after the second round, with all the confusion and uncertainty about what the results really were or should have been, he had a lot of encouragement from many Afghans to protest the outcome when the positions reversed between himself and President Ghani. And for the good of his country, he chose to find a way to create a coalition government in which he would take the role of chief executive, which is, by the way, obviously an extraordinarily important position, because that whole reform agenda still needs to be tackled, and it's going to take a lot of time of both himself and President Ghani to have any chance in it. But we've all heard from our friends in the political science and international relations literature, it's that first peaceful transfer of power in a young democracy that is the most crucial. And I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming the man who, more than anyone else, made sure that first transfer of power in the history of the young Afghan democracy was peaceful and successful, Dr. Abdullah Abdullah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank Brookings Institution, John Thornton, Bruce Rydell, Mr. Honeyland, for inviting me today and for you to participate here. And thank you for your kind remarks, both of you. And Bali, Indonesia, memories of my friend, late Ambassador Holbrooke. And prior to that, we were together, you might remember, in Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, and a little bit of horse riding and wild terrain, and the in deep affection that Ambassador Holbrooke maintained for Afghanistan was unique. So thank you for remembering a good friend of Afghanistan and a good friend of mine. And thank you for your kind words. There is no doubt that 2 rounds of elections, both were interesting elections. But we opted for which was good for Afghanistan, for our people and for the future of our country, and at the same time for our partnership with the United States, a country which has helped us through difficult times and contributed towards our situation and have made sacrifice alongside our people. Great deal in blood and treasure. So thank you, thank Brookings Institution, thank your people, your administration, your representatives, those men and women who served in Afghanistan, as a result of which conditions for millions of Afghans have changed for better. Afghanistan today, Afghanistan 14 years ago, different places. Millions of people are enjoying their rights and right for education, right for political participation, and living in better conditions because of the services which were rendered to them, which wouldn't have been possible without your support, your taxpayers' money, your generous support. Roads, clinics, hospitals, schools, cultural centers, vocational centers, technical support, capacity building, building an army from the scratch. I remember 2002 in the first conference in Tokyo, which was the conference for reconstruction of Afghanistan. Formation of national army was an idea which was talked in the sideline of the Tokyo conference. We talked about it, but just as an idea. And today we have security forces which have shouldered responsibility courageously. If 2.5 years ago it was presence of 140,000 international troops in Afghanistan, today it is 12,000 international troops in Afghanistan. It's a big change. But talking about casualties, those achievements of our forces have come with a big price. The number of casualties of our forces in year 2014, according to the latest statistics, is equal to the number of casualties of international troops throughout the past 14 years. So that's the price that our people is paying in defense of human values, rights of the people, men and women of this country, in order not to let Afghanistan to go back to the dark days of Taliban rule. Unity government was formed with all its issues that being discussed about, or the perceptions about the unity government, it is functioning, and it will be an enduring phenomena, and that's based on the need of our people in our country, and we will make it work better with more competence and efficiency. The past 6 months, personally, I was expecting better performance. Nevertheless, the challenges that we had inherited from previous administration were huge challenges. The first thing that happened, the people of Afghanistan were and are more hopeful towards the future, rather than following the path of confrontation to the end. We opted for the path of working together for the interest of the country. That was the people received it very well. That was a very good sign for the people. Then, as far as our partnership with the United States and the international community is concerned, there, from the day one, there was a new spirit, a spirit of thankfulness, a spirit of true, sincere friendship and partnership. We signed the bilateral security agreement in the first day in office. After the first day in office, our parliament approved it, and then the partnership was revived. And recent visit to Washington, the current visit of us to Washington, the past 4 days, I would say I can consider it as a milestone in our relations, in forging relations on foundation of trust, mutual trust, and mutual respect. The full day in Camp David were discussions on wide ranges of issues, from security and defense up to human rights, women's rights, education, health, economic development, reconciliation, economic cooperation in the region, regional cooperation. All these spheres of relations were discussed and substantially discussed, and I consider it quality discussions, which during my time as foreign minister and afterwards, I've never been, I can say with authority that this was for the first time that we had substantial discussions with the key national security team of the administration and Camp David, and also later on the White House discussions with President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the team. It helped us revive relations and reset it on the right track for the common interest of both countries. And yesterday's address by President Ghani to the joint session of the Congress, those parameters of our vision of self-reliance in the coming decade was outlined, and also the spirit that Afghan people are pursuing. With it was communicated, and which was a spirit of thankfulness, but at the same time seeking cooperation in order to consolidate the achievements of the past 13 years, which are essential for both countries, for stabilization of Afghanistan, for pursuit of reform agenda, and all that Afghan people are aspiring towards. The current visit, I consider it as it was a necessary step, but at the same time, it turned out to be substantial sign of substantial progress in change in partnership between both countries. The fact that President Obama announced flexibility in terms of the portfolio of the forces through 2015, that was something that we were very much in need and very much expected. We're grateful for that. The asking for budget support for our national security forces for 2017, or signing of MOU on economic support, based incentivization of support based on conditions of reform, in discussions that we had on regional cooperation and reconciliation, as well as energy issues. Those were issues which will help the situation in Afghanistan in the years to come. Unity government is a new experience for us, and sometimes from outside it's looked upon as it's not working, and I have no doubt, and as you can appreciate, that in every government there will be discussions, there will be issues, there will be issues which will be matter of serious discussions and debate. In this line, we are not an exception to that. But at the same time, we had never experienced. It has always been different in Afghanistan. I can proudly say that this is something that we have opted for consciously, under those circumstances that the interest of the country required from us, and we will make it work, and with the assurance that is given to us in regards to the continued commitment from the United States. When we go back to the country, our people will be more hopeful. Those millions of women whose lives have changed for better, or millions of children who are going to schools, or millions of hopeful people which want to see their country live in peace within and without, in the neighborhood and beyond, and also enjoy the opportunities in Afghanistan, which are for us as well as for the countries around us to benefit from. It will be good news. Thank the United States for reiterating its commitment in its support for the people of Afghanistan. Then, when you have the outline of the President Ghani's remarks, which provide us with the way forward, I may touch upon a few aspects of what we are up against. One is the reconciliation. Recently, President Ghani has visited region and also beyond the region. Talking about Mr. Karzai, former President Karzai, he is also in Australia, I think, at the moment, visiting Australia. So that's a different subject that we will. Yeah, in the neighborhood, we focused on Pakistan. One of the first visits paid to the region was to Pakistan, to Saudi Arabia, to China, to Azerbaijan. I visited Kazakhstan, I visited India, and there have been efforts in order to open a new opportunity for our relations with the neighboring countries. There is a common challenge that we are faced with. That's the challenge of terrorism. Now, ISIL or ISIS has emerged as a new challenge in that part of the world, which we will also be affected because of it. And I will get into some details of it when time comes. Security is terrorism is a common threat between us and Pakistan. Security is a main challenge in Afghanistan. Taliban-related security issues. There are other terrorist groups which have shifted towards Afghanistan as a result of operations in the other side of the line. That is our main challenge. As I mentioned earlier, our forces have taken up that challenge bravely, and they will be tested throughout the upcoming few months. The extent of the challenge posed, I can describe it in one sentence, that if a few years ago it was 130,000 foreign troops, and today it's only 12,000 troops. You can imagine how challenging it has been, but in spite of that, Taliban have not been able to capture any major city or capture more areas, but they are still posing a threat. Yesterday there was a suicidal attack in Kabul, and the day before yesterday on the highway there was a security incident. This is how we are dealing with the situation within Afghanistan. And at the same time, millions of people are hopeful to see a peaceful end to this problem. And as representatives of the people, our leadership, President Ghani, all of us, have made efforts in this regard. So far, no negotiation has taken place between our government and Taliban. But contacts have been made in order to facilitate negotiations. But once negotiations start, does that mean that there will be peace immediately in Afghanistan? The answer, unfortunately, is no. It will be a start of a process. But this time around, the parameters that we have set for ourselves in terms of negotiations is very clear. Giving up violence, severing links with the terrorist groups, and respecting the Constitution, and fighting for your rights, for your ideas, politically, in the realm of the Afghan Constitution, and preserving the rights of the people, achievements of the past 14 years. There is no way that one can make compromise on the rights of majority of people in the country, men and women of the country, on their basic rights, under the illusion that we will going to have peace. So these are very clear parameters that the unity government has mandate based upon to continue the efforts in making peace. But so far, no negotiation has taken place. And there are hopes in this regard amongst the people. There are concerns. Women of Afghanistan are concerned that their rights might be compromised. That's not anybody's intention. And we will make sure that women will be represented from the first phases of negotiations up to the end of it. That is our commitment. Then, in terms of regional cooperation, Afghanistan's location, at times in our history, we have suffered because of it. It's time to look at it differently, as a sort of land bridge between South Asia and Central Asia, which can provide connectivity for trade, transit, exchange of goods, energy, in peoples-to-peoples relations. Some work has started, and some actual work has been done in this regard, but this is the start. There are energy projects, transmission lines, gas pipeline, which was an idea 20 years ago. It was being talked about as an idea. What if gas from Turkmenistan goes through a pipeline from Afghanistan to Pakistan? Later on, actual work started, and now India is also part of that. And recently there has been progress in the negotiations in the steering committee, which has been established in this regard. So we hope that in 4 or 5 years' time, there will be gas and pipeline, if things goes according to the timeline. There is the idea of transmission line from Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, through Afghanistan to Pakistan. There is the idea of a joint electricity project between Afghanistan and Pakistan that will address our energy needs. These are the areas that that create dependency in, apart from its economic opportunities that it creates for the people in our region. That also helps us in a stabilization of the region. But at the same time, realistically speaking, we are in the first phases. Some of them are only ideas, some of them are things, actual work which is underway but needs a lot of more work to be done. And the future of the country is promising, provided we are leaders in the unity government and our people together seize the moment. Before the security challenges which has affected other parts of our region affect us, we should deal with the issues within the country, so it helps us lay the foundation for stability. One of the areas that we have serious commitment, that is the areas of governance in rule of law, in fighting against corruption. Talking about adherence to the rule of law, you might have heard, you might have seen, you might have heard the news about brutal treatment of a young woman on the streets of Kabul, Farkhunda. It was a tragic event. It was a heinous crime committed in daylight by the mob. That issue has been taken very seriously by the government of Afghanistan. 22 people have been arrested in regards to this incident. Among them are some of the people which were seen in that video. And the government is committed to pursue this issue with intensity, intense care and focus, so those who are the culprits of this heinous crime will be punished in accordance to the law. So I'm talking about two sides of the story, but the prominent side of the story is the hopes of millions of Afghans, younger generation, who are aspiring for better lives. Last night, I was in an event, in a reception arranged by Turquoise Mountain, which is a foundation which was established in Kabul a few years ago. And then you see that in that project, hundreds of young artisans were working, trained, and they are working, and now they are exporting the products, which is from one side reminder of the rich culture in art, richness of culture in art in our history, but at the same time it's a good business model in Afghanistan. And again, thanks to the U.S. support, this project also, the main donor is the USAID. And next year, in March, in 11 months, Smithsonian Museum will have an exhibition of the artifacts from Afghanistan. So there are lots of hopeful stories, and we are committed to materialize the hopes and aspirations of our people and facilitate for it. Going back to Kabul, there are lots of priorities that we have to deal with it. I mentioned the issues of governance in rule of law. Now we have we have nominated our ministers. They will be going to the parliament in a few days' time, amongst which there are 4 women, capable women introduced as nominated as ministers, and hopefully they will get the approval from the parliament. The appointment of the governors, the reform in the judiciary, the reform of the electoral system. So Afghanistan will not get back to the point that we were taken during the presidential elections, where the country, in stability of the country, in survival of the country, was put into question. It's that important, it's that significant that we have the electoral reforms carried out, and parliamentary elections and district council elections, which takes place afterward, will be based on the fair rule and transparent for the people of Afghanistan. So from one side, it strengthens the trust of the people over the democratic process. From another side, it will pave the way for further reform, including the reform in the government level, moving from a highly centralized presidential system into taking a step towards a little bit of devolution of authority. And as you mentioned earlier, even at a time that we were fighting for presidential, contesting in the presidential elections, this was our idea. That would provide better place for participation in the national level, better place for accountability, and help efficiency of the government. And today, the chief executive, the role of chief executive. In some countries, I have to explain it. Here, CEO has a different meaning. And when I was a few days ago, I was in India. I was asked, I said that it's like prime minister, but he said, okay, you are the prime minister. I said, no, I'm not the prime minister. It is like the prime minister. So, because in India, prime minister is a very powerful person, especially the current one, which has the mandate of votes from hundreds of millions of people in that country. So once that structural reform is carried out, my job will be easier to explain who I am, and or anybody in my position. I'm not reserving this position for myself. So it will be easier to explain. But at this stage, I thought that as introduction, that I suffice with this, and sit here and ask for a cup of tea, and let Bruce Riedel, the right expert on Afghanistan, to answer all the questions, including his own.
You have some water, but we'll try to get you some tea. Yes, yes.
Sore throat is the right excuse to have tea.
I think the Brookings Institution can find some tea. It shouldn't be too difficult. I also want to extend my appreciation for your coming, Dr. Abdullah, and my admiration for your years of service to your country. As Americans, we're watching your experience in unity government with, I think, a certain degree of envy. Might be an interesting idea to think about a chief executive officer working with the president in our country, but I don't see it anywhere on the immediate horizon. What we're going to do now is I'm going to pose a few questions to Dr. Abdullah, and then we'll open it up to you. When we do open it up, I ask you to please ask a question, identify yourself, and not make a statement. The visit of yourself and President Ghani, I think, has already transformed the American-Afghan relationship. As someone who's watched this relationship literally since 1979, I think this is the first time that Americans have heard from Afghans the kind of words that we've heard in the last several days, and it is deeply appreciated, and I think it will have an impact far off into the future. But I'd like to start with the security issue, which you mentioned. You mentioned the casualties Afghan forces are taking, and we appreciate the sacrifice that they are making as well. I'm looking at, we now have less than 2 years before American forces are supposed to go down to a very small level. What do you need in the security realm? What are the highest priorities? What are the biggest gaps that we need to fill between now and the end of 2016, when, at least according to our current plan, most American forces, what would you identify as the gaps that are most important in the security arena?
First of all, while this flexibility to maintain the level of troops by nearly 10,000 through 2015, that will help us in the resolute support mission, which is train, advise, and assist. And support is, that support will enable us to deal with the challenges of upcoming Taliban offensives, or as our effort in dealing with the areas which we think that these are the hubs for the terrorists within the country, and we have to deal with them. At the same time, there is the issue of enablers, which is the air support, medical evacuation, transport, intelligence capabilities, reconnaissance capabilities, which these were part of our discussions in Camp David as well as in White House. Excuse me. And to speed up in that front.
Right.
And also working in collaboration, in cooperation with us in some aspects of our regional diplomacy. That will also be helpful.
Did you feel you came away from Camp David and the White House, particularly on the enablers front? I mean, this is an issue that, for example, Mike has been writing about now for 5 years, that certain requirements that the American military would never consider going into a battle without. We seem to think that the Afghan military can go in and you don't need air power after all. That's only Americans. Do you feel like you have an assurance we're going to move on this front?
Already things are happening in that front. I will not go into details of it, but what we are asking for is to adapt it to the as we are moving forward in dealing with the challenges that we are facing. So the speed is something that we are asking for.
You also mentioned reconciliation, which is an issue that Americans have taken some time coming to appreciate. I would say we went through a first phase where we were against it, a second phase where we wanted to be the reconciliation, leave Afghans out of it, and now hopefully a phase where we recognize it's got to be an Afghan-led and Afghan-determined process. You said there have been contacts but no negotiations. I would appreciate your appraisal of whether you think the Afghan Taliban and Mullah Omar and the Quetta Shura are, you think, ripe for a reconciliation process at this time? I realize that's an estimate that you have to make, not based on hard data, but I'd appreciate your estimate.
Before getting to the estimate and the assessment of the current situation, give me a hint about the fourth phase.
We would be happy to have the signing ceremony at the Brookings Institute.
The answer remains to be, the answer to your question, it remains to be tested. There might be groups, or there are some indications that there are groups amongst the Taliban that they want to join the process. There are groups that they haven't thought about it, and they are still hopeful that they can turn the tide militarily in their favor. So it ranges. And once it starts, then one will have a better picture. There will be already, as far as the reintegration is concerned, in some parts of the country, the Taliban commanders, they are showing willingness to join, which under the certain guarantees and circumstances, it has been welcomed. The Taliban as a whole should feel some pressure. That's my understanding.
Right.
Before they think seriously about negotiations.
Can you give me some of the things that, as outsiders, we should look for on this process that might give us an indication that they are feeling that pressure? Should we anticipate, fractures in the Taliban, or is there any milestone that an outside observer can look at and say, yeah, this looks like it's moving forward, or it's still too hard to tell?
At this stage, there are no signs that we can convince ourselves that there are serious consideration in their part. But nevertheless, the people of Afghanistan want us, and we also want to make efforts in this regard with those clear parameters. What we have, which was part of our discussions here as well, was the fact that we will be realistic about our expectations, and also when it comes to our partners, we will share the situation with our partners, and where we needed support, we needed facilitation, we will call on you, and that has to be the way forward.
I think at a minimum, like the transformation this visit is producing, a clear Afghan-led effort at reconciliation puts the moral onus and the burden of proof where it lies, on the Taliban, to demonstrate that they're interested in it. You mentioned in Pakistan in this regard, and obviously Pakistan is a critical player, and both you and President Ghani have been transformative in how you talk about Pakistan as well from years past. You've had opportunities to go, you've received them in Kabul, you've heard a lot of nice words. Are we, again, in a position where you can say we're beginning to see a change in Pakistan's strategy towards Afghanistan, or is it still too soon to come to a conclusion?
Certain things has happened. In Pakistan, the state institutions, military installations were attacked by their own Taliban. The school attack, the brutal attack on school children, and certain other developments. There is also a relatively new government, elected government, and new leadership. What we see is positive messages on the recognition of the fact that terrorism is a threat to all of us, and we have to deal with it. It is different from the past. That's why Afghan government and leadership was encouraged to make further approaches and continue to make those efforts. When would that be that we will have results on the ground in support of those messages? Yet to be seen.
Is there a role for Washington in this process, or should we let you and Pakistan deal with it?
Washington is already playing a role in it, without going into details of it. But at the same time, like every other issue which affects both sides, Afghanistan and the United States, to keep one another appraised of the efforts all the time and evaluate it all the time, and then see what is the role for each side. That will be the way forward.
Let me turn to your other big neighbor, Iran. The United States and Iran are going through one of the most complex phases in what has been a tortuous and complex relationship for a long time. We are engaged in serious negotiations on nuclear issues. We're kind of co-partners in the war in Iraq. Now, perhaps on opposite sides of a war in Yemen. I don't want to ask you to comment on on that environment.
What about Tikrit?
Tikrit, right. It's, the U.S.-Iranian relationship is becoming so complex today, you should always write everything in pencil, because in an hour you'll have to erase it and write it something else. But in the Afghan context, in the context of your security situation and your relationship with your neighbor, how would you characterize Afghan-Iranian relations and what the Iranians are doing in terms of helping to either enhance security or damage security?
I would say that we have good relations with Iran, and they have maintained friendship towards Afghanistan in spite of their diverse type of relations with our partners. And Afghanistan also have reciprocated, so it's friendly relations altogether, and that has been like this throughout the past 14 years. Right. That does not suggest that there are not issues in between both countries, but as a whole, normal, friendly relations. But your question didn't help simplify your relations. Who should I refer to get a... Who should I go to?
We are fortunate to have so many Iran experts at Brookings. We can actually have one deal with each of these different parts of the U.S.-Iranian relationship.
On certain other issues, for example, on the issues of connectivity between South Asia and Central Asia, Chabahar,
right?
Should we be able to work together with India, Iran, and Central Asian countries? This is in the interest of all of us,
right?
Because that gives us connectivity. There are certain issues which relate for example, which takes Pakistan and India, both of it, into account. Direct access to Wagah, transport, land access to Wagah. That will help trade in transit for all of us. There are these then the opportunities for investment. It is there for all the countries of the region and beyond. This TAPI, which I mentioned earlier, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, that is something that will help. So the approach that Afghanistan is undertaking is not to wait for every problem to be solved and then start from somewhere, to try to see what could be done in the context of today's relations, and then be forward-looking in hope that tomorrow will be easier than today.
So from the standpoint of that connectivity for Afghanistan, a resolution of the nuclear issue and a lifting of sanctions that would permit more connectivity is clearly in your national interest and something that would help Afghanistan.
Of course, right. Of course.
You alluded to him, the Prime Minister of India, one of the larger-than-life political figures of our day in many ways. One of the challenges of Afghan governance and Afghan foreign policy is always how do you deal with two neighbors who are at each other's throats most of the time. India has devoted a lot of resources to helping Afghanistan in the last 14 years. That's so far been a positive relationship. Is there room for more growth in the Afghan-Indian relationship?
You reminded me of the late King of Afghanistan, King Zahir Shah, which passed away a few years ago. And I was foreign minister at that time. When he returned back, we escorted him, accompanied him, returning back to Afghanistan. And then somewhat, he was very happy talking to me. He was a great character, a great personality, and very dignified person. And one day he said that the foreign relations of Afghanistan, foreign policy of Afghanistan, this is for our Afghan audience, but then I will translate it. I'll say it in Farsi, but I'll translate it, try to translate it into English as well. مثل پل صراط است. It's like what we believe in the Judgment Day, that there is a very narrow bridge, that if you commit the slightest sin, you will fall either this way or that way, but both sides you're in trouble. And this was a story of a few years ago.
Right.
At the same time, as you yourself rightly mentioned, India has helped Afghanistan in many ways, the fifth largest donor. India traditionally is not a donor country, but in regards to Afghanistan, over $2 billion of assistances based on our demand. Infrastructure, road, electricity dam, clinic, school, agriculture, transmission line, building our parliament house. In many ways, technical assistances, education. So these are cultural exchanges. And in India's expectation from Afghanistan or interest in Afghanistan is a little bit simplified in the context of its projection of influence or power as a preeminent power in our region. Stable Afghanistan, which is a functioning regime, a functioning government, preferably democratic, and doesn't allow terrorists to grow in its own soil, and facilitate for connectivity of the region, which is very much in line with what we seek in our own country, regardless of other countries' expectations. That, on top of their generous assistances, has created a very solid foundation. Then comes relations between countries, regardless of Afghanistan, in the context of the regional issues. They have their own challenges. Each country has its own challenge. One thing about India has been that it has not looked towards Afghanistan always in its totality from the spectacle of its relations with Pakistan. It's not like that. Vice versa, sometimes it's a bit different. So the prospect of expansion of relations is there, and the relations between both countries can only grow further.
Let me turn to one other issue before opening it up, and that's the question of women's rights. You, in your opening remarks, took on directly the heinous act that took place. Here's the question I have. In the reconciliation process, or in context in the reconciliation process, there's a pretty big divergence of view between where you stand, where the Afghan government stands, and where the Taliban has traditionally stood.
Automatically, you have not excluded me from the government, yes?
No.
Yeah, considering me a part of the government.
You're the chief executive officer.
Okay.
You know, we've actually copied the Afghan model here at Brookings, where we've now made Martin Indyk the chief executive officer. So we're the first to get on the bandwagon behind Afghanistan, Brookings, and now we'll see who else follows. Seems to me this is a tough line here. You said in your remarks that women will be part of the negotiations process. That won't be an easy fit for the Taliban to reciprocate. But I'd like to just ask you to speak a little bit more about the question of women's rights and the whole process of reconciliation going forward, and how tough that is going to be.
But before coming to that, where is Martin Indyk?
He's out getting money for the Brookings Institution, which is, he does very well.
Not in the Middle East. Eh?
No, in the Middle East.
In the Middle East. Let me say something which is a joke. And a child was asking his mother to have chocolate, sweets, and the mother was denying him. And there was a melon up there, and the mother was very angry and said that, look, shut up, or otherwise I will hit the melon in your head. And then he said that I'm asking for melon. So you reminded me of Martin Indyk. I asked him, where is he? The role of women in also our concept as a whole. Sometimes there is a sort of automatic interpretation of the efforts for reconciliation that it may require us to make compromise on the fundamental rights of our people. More than half of the population, or in cases, the whole population. Right. There are, as a result of the sacrifices of the Afghan people, which I always, when I talk about our sacrifices, I refer to your sacrifices as well alongside our people. There are achievements which are irreversible. It looks shaky at times, but like the incident that took place a few days ago, this gave a different picture. But as a whole, there are things that has changed for better, which will not be reversed and should not be reversed. In a proposition that you go to the negotiating table and you make compromises on behalf of your own people under an illusion that you can have peace, that will not lead us to peace. That will be another disruption in our life. There is no doubt that the differences are as sharp as you can imagine. It's important that regardless of how eager we are to achieve peace, we should keep these parameters very clear in our mind, in our thoughts, and also in our actions. So is our expectation from our partners to take it easy on these fundamental issues. Will never make life easier for our people. Or, that's contrary to whatever we have committed ourselves towards our people. So that's, but the differences are very sharp.
I'd like to open it up. Please, Gary, I think we have a microphone coming, and if you would please identify yourself briefly.
Thanks very much, Dr. Abdullah. I'm Garrett Mitchell. I write the Mitchell Report, and I wanted to ask you to imagine that we're here a year from today, and your purpose in being here a year from today is to be able to describe with some sense of measurability how we've done as a government, this unity government that you've talked about. You've referenced key issues like reconciliation and regional relationships and security, et cetera. But other than that sense that you could have that we're doing well and we've made improvements, are there specific ways, are there specific measurements that would allow you to say, and here are some examples that will demonstrate to the world at large that Afghanistan has been able to achieve significant progress with this unity government?
Before getting to your specific point, at the same time, I always try to take the attention of ourselves as well as those partners of us which are interested in what we inherited as a government from the past. There was a total absence of adherence to the rule of law. Corruption was tolerated and has become, it was not an exception, it was the rule. And take it to the to every level. And what we are saying, the efforts that we have made so far is not sufficient, but at the same time we have made decisions. In regards to dealing with corruption, the biggest scandal was the Kabul Bank, which in the first few days it was addressed, and then now hopefully we are in the stage of recovery of the money from those who were responsible for it. There are on the if you take the appointments of the cabinet, while always there will be political considerations, but the competence and also integrity and credibility of the nominees has been the main thing in our mind, rather than just deciding on the basis of political expediency. Dealing with corruption will require political will, leadership, vision, and then certain enabling circumstances in conditions. And in regards to security in our country, I mentioned about the relations between Afghanistan and the United States, which as a result of those tensions earlier, we missed a lot of opportunities. Apart from that, the leadership in Afghanistan has taken the ownership and the lead in boosting the morale of our forces, in also bringing about changes, retirement of some 60 generals which were there, which should have been retired for the past, like 5-6 years ago. They should have been retired. They were there, just there. And what we did was the president decided to sign on their retirement letters so the other tiers of leadership can go up and be more hopeful that because those positions were like reserved for those people. So in different sectors, in procurement, in regards to the contracts, which were a main source of corruption in most cases, there have been reviews. These are on the issues of human rights within our national security forces. The report published here was an eye-opener to us. The issue of detention centers, female detention centers. It was never the case that the cabinet or council, now I'm in charge of the Council of the Ministers, I'm convening the Council of Ministers, the President is convening the cabinet meetings. The Council of Ministers meetings are weekly, regular meetings. In cabinet meetings are regular, but not on a set date, which there the vice presidents will also participate. But in the Council of Ministers, it will be the CEO and the ministers. A whole Council of Ministers meeting agenda was on the issue of female detention centers, how to improve the conditions there, or the underage detention facilities, where we had serious challenges there. Talking about education, it was decided that a piece of land should be given to the teachers in different parts of the country. And at the beginning, that announcement was made, but everybody looked at it with suspicion. But now the process has started. And so it's still, I would say that perhaps we want to do lots of things at the same time. It's better to prioritize it even further, priorities within priorities, and identify it and move forward. But I'm not drawing a rosy picture. I'm saying that the challenges are as big as you can imagine. But there is an opportunity also for the unity government to move forward and to make it work.
Let's get a couple of questions. One over here.
سلام. عبدالله پوپزای هستم.
Yes.
عبدالله پوپزای هستم. So this is Abdullah Popazai, a LLM student in the United States. So most welcome. The first question is that reforms in the Constitution of Afghanistan was a part of the agreement of national unity government to break the chain of monopoly power of the president. So it was a part of national unity government of Afghanistan in the agreement you signed with President Ghani. And beside that, there are some ambiguity in our constitution. For example, in 3 different articles, they mention that they support rule of law, they support human rights, and in another article, they say that they respect human rights, and in another article, they say that regulate human rights. As a law student, each word has its own definitions, and I'm asking that, does national unity government decide to bring and to clarify these terminologies as well or not? And the second question, President Karzai had formal trips more than 22 times to Pakistan for reconciliation, but he was not successful. How can you say that in the future you, with President Ghani, will be successful and we will to create a hope for us to have a peaceful life down there? Thank you, sir.
Let's get one more question. The gentleman right here.
Good afternoon, Joe Cruz. I have a question. You may be aware, even though we live in a highly wired society here, it's oftentimes a challenge to get really good international news. So when you speak of the government entering into possible negotiations with the Taliban, what do you consider the Taliban today? Are they largely disillusioned Afghans? Are they foreign fighters? What numbers are we dealing with? Is it a small percentage of the population? And kind of a follow-on to the question you were asked earlier, what do you really see as the one or two most daunting challenges? Is this a conversation centered on ideology, or is this going to be a pragmatic discussion? Thank you.
About reform or amendment to the Constitution. That is part of our agenda. Elections needs to take place beforehand, parliamentary elections as well as district council elections, which will not be on time because those reforms are not carried out as of yet. The commission, a special commission, has been formed. There are some issues in relations with it. When we return back home, we will address those issues, and then those amendments will be made in the Constitution. The tendency is not to open the Constitution for further amendments at this stage, because that will complicate the issues further. There are some other ambiguities as well. These are not the examples that you were referring to, are not the exceptions. And what is our attitude? What is our attitude towards this? There we stick to the spirit of the Constitution, which is adherence to our international obligations, as well as our commitment to the human rights and women's rights. That was the example that you yourself referred to. In regards to efforts which previous leadership had conducted in regards to the betterment of relations with Pakistan, I agree. There have been efforts. At times, there are lessons based on those efforts, but I will not consider it as a sort of waste of time. We have serious challenges to deal with it. We have serious issues to discuss. And any effort in that regard will be a worthwhile effort. But in our expectations, we have to be realistic. We shouldn't start on the basis of pessimism or over optimism, and allow ourselves to learn and to make the right effort and not to repeat the mistakes of the past. In regards to the Taliban, who are they? What percentage of population? What is their characteristics? They used to be a sort of a unified movement in the early years of their emergence, and also after the early years of the U.S. engagement in Afghanistan. Excuse me. And now they are divided into different shuras. There is Quetta Shura, there is Peshawar Shura, there is Haqqani group, and also there are groups called Taliban inside the country, which they might not have institutional organizational links with their own leadership. There are groups that have very strong ties to the terrorist groups and organizations. Excuse me. And there are other groups that they have very strong ties with the criminal gangs and narco mafia. There isn't a unified definition of the Taliban. And also, when we are talking about the talks in negotiations, there are groups which are stationed in Doha, for example. They are representing a part of the Taliban, not the whole Taliban. And some of them, there are foreign links are very, very strong. And let's visualize a situation where the Taliban, under the leadership of Mullah Omar, they say that we are ready to talk and negotiate. Though Mullah Omar, their leader, is not seen in the past 1.5 or 2 years' time. Nobody has seen him. Huh? More than that. It doesn't mean that he has turned himself into an invisible figure, but something is going on. Haqqani Network is growingly emerging as an independent, though they have kept the umbrella of Islamic Emirate, and their links with the terrorist groups are very, very tight. So it's these different characteristics and different aspects of the evolution which has taken place at this stage, which has to be taken into account.
I think we've gotten you some fresh tea. I'll let you have a chance at that. And let's take a couple of questions in the back. There are two right behind you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Abdullah, last time you were in DC, I asked you a question at the Heritage Foundation. And your answer was that even majority of the Pakistani commissioned officer in the Pakistani army might be Pathan, or they just have Khan as their last name, but short are called by Punjabi generals. So my question to you is the same. Given that the current Pakistani boss, General Sharif, has been in Afghanistan many times, he is really treating Afghanistan like a twin brother. Do you have the same answer? And I'm asking you the same question because I have one Karzai friend, Facebook friend, and then I have Karzai friend in Silver Spring. He one day called me, he told me I'm stupid. I said, why? He said, your Karzai friend in Afghanistan personally oversee the training of the troublemaker, Balochi troublemaker who go to Pakistan and create problem in Pakistani Balochistan. Thanks.
Yes. And you're sure that it was me myself, yes?
Let's take one more question so you can have another sip of tea.
Rahim Rashidi from Kurdistan TV.
Okay.
What is the difference between Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Taliban for yourself? And I know you were Afghan freedom fighters. What is your opinion about Kurdish forces' Peshmerga role to fight against terrorism? Thank you.
You can choose which questions you wish to respond to.
I'm still thinking.
Okay.
There are, I will, in reference to your question, I will rather address it in general terms. There are certain things which have changed in Afghanistan as well as in Pakistan, which we cannot ignore it, and we see an opportunity there, and if there is an opportunity, it will be a waste if we miss it. Things has to prove itself in the course of time. That's my attitude. As far as you are friends with the same the same second name is concerned, I will not interfere between your friends. So you choose which one is saying the right thing and judge it on that basis. Al-Qaeda, it was while ISIS has an ideology, Al-Qaeda has an ideology, at the same time, Al-Qaeda's main target was anti-American ideas, and it was founded on that by using the religious sentiments, but at the same time, it was anti-Western and anti-American ideas. While ISIS is thinking of Islamic Caliphate, which is perhaps that was also in the back of mind of Al-Qaeda people, but they are not gone that far. Right. But now they are seeking territory, and then the appeal is different this time than when Al-Qaeda started its programs. There are similarities, but there is a very sharp, stark difference as well in this regard. Then come Taliban. Taliban, I've explained it. About Kurdish Peshmergas defending their own territory, I would say that in the face of terror and terrorist threats, every nation and every person and every ethnic group, when the state is not capable of dealing with those threats, then the people will rely on their own resources and on their own basis to defend themselves. And they have proved, the Kurdish Peshmergas have proved themselves to be effective force in dealing with ISIS so far.
We are reaching almost the witching hour, so what I'm going to do is take two more questions and then let you answer those and give up any final remarks you'd like to make, Dr. Abdullah. I am struck by your characterization of Mullah Omar. In all the wars that America has fought, I don't think we've ever had an enemy who we really have no idea whether he's alive, dead, mentally sane or insane, who is so reclusive that it's like fighting, as you said, the invisible man here.
About the mental status, I can give you a hint, but...
All right, two more questions, one right here and one right there.
Congratulations on your new job as CEO. I saw you before the Cosmos Club about 6 years ago. The future relations of Afghanistan and China, could you comment on that?
Let's get one more and then we'll wrap it up.
Salam, Dr. Abdullah. I hope you have found Washington welcoming. I'm a student. My name is Miranda. I'm a student at American University. I was hoping you could comment on how the new administration is planning to address the challenges of the opium industry.
Of
opium.
These are the last questions.
Say two.
Ready. Okay. On the Afghanistan-China relations, as President Ghani put it mildly and modestly 1 or 2 days ago in one of his addresses, that we are in the middle of populated countries, over 3 billion population around us, and we are a neighboring country to China. China has been, just referring to the past relations in the past 13 years, China has been helping us in reconstruction of the country. And recent visit by President Ghani to China, in my own meetings with Chinese premier, that was in Astana, Kazakhstan, in the sideline of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. It has opened a new chapter, I can call it. China is also concerned about the ETIM in Afghanistan. At the same time, we would like to expand relations in other spheres. Trade is already taking place in certain other areas of cooperation. China is also interested in investment in Afghanistan. Already invested in copper mine, and have put Chinese companies have put their names in the bidding for gas and oil in northern Afghanistan. So there are areas of cooperation and areas of expansion of relations. It's for Afghanistan how to project its interest in a way vis-a-vis different players in the region. So rather than Afghanistan becoming a sort of a place of contest in its negative way, it becomes a place of contest in a positive aspect of way. We expect good relations and betterment of relations for times to come. And opium production. This is an area that successive efforts of Afghanistan and our partners in dealing with the issue of opium has failed, unfortunately. We were optimistic at the beginning by providing alternative means of livelihood to the farmers and strengthening the law enforcement agencies in dealing with the traffickers. We might be able to deal with this issue. Unfortunately, it has developed in an environment of insecurity in the areas which Taliban are under control. In the areas where government controls, mainly, this problem has been dealt with and addressed. There are provinces of Afghanistan which have brought it to zero opium cultivation. But at the same time, the areas where Taliban have some influence or it's not secure, in those areas it has developed. It's a very serious challenge for Afghanistan. It's not just a security challenge, it's a security challenge, law enforcement. It criminalizes the economy. It's to deal with it at different level. One is the farmers, which are the one which are making the least profit from it. Next one is the middlemen and the main traffickers. Some arrest has been taking place of the big traffickers, big names. One or two have been released, have been able to escape, which are funding the war. For example, the one in Helmand. That is what is happening there. It's a complex situation, and for Afghanistan only on its own to claim that we will be able to overcome this challenge, it will be an exaggeration. It takes the transit countries to play their role. The precursors are coming from other countries to Afghanistan. The opium is being traded through other countries to the rest of the world. And also the consumption is somewhere else. So all three parts of this has to play its role in order to be able to deal with it. But it will not be, as a matter of policy, it will not be tolerated by the government, and we will do whatever in our hands to deal with it.
Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. I know your schedule is very busy. I would ask everyone if you could just remain in your seats for a minute so that we can get Dr. Abdullah and his party on their way to their next engagement. Thank you. Your candor, as always, is refreshing. I said it before, we could do with a unity government in the United States, but thank God we've at least got a chief executive officer on the model of Afghanistan. So thank you again.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you.